The birth of Our Lady as seen by mystic Anne Catherine Emmerich from the book titled, The Life of the Blessed Virgin Mary. I had a vision of the creation of Mary's most holy soul and of its being united to her most pure body. In the glory by which the most holy Trinity is usually represented in my visions, I saw a movement like a great shining mountain, and yet also like a human figure, and I saw something rise out of the midst of this figure towards its mouth and go forth from it like a shining brightness. Then I saw this brightness standing separate before the face of God, turning and shaping itself, or rather being shaped, for I saw that while this brightness took human form, yet it was by the will of God that it received a form so unspeakably beautiful. I saw, too, that God showed the beauty of this soul to the angels, and that they had unspeakable joy in its beauty. I am unable to describe in words all that I saw and understood. When 17 weeks and 5 days after the conception of the Blessed Virgin had gone by, that is to say, 5 days before Anna's pregnancy was half accomplished, I saw Our Lady's Holy Mother lying asleep in her bed in her house near Nazareth. Then there came a shining light above her, and a ray from this light fell upon the middle of her side, and the light passed into her in the shape of a little shining human figure. In the same instant I saw Our Lady's Holy Mother raise herself on her couch surrounded by light. She was in ecstasy, and had a vision of her womb opening like a tabernacle to enclose a shining little virgin from whom man's whole salvation was to spring. I saw that this was the instant in which for the first time the child moved within her. Anna then rose from her couch, dressed herself, and announced her joy to the holy Joachim. They both thanked God, and I saw them praying under the tree in the garden where the angel had comforted Anna. It was made known to me that the Blessed Virgin's soul was united to her body 5 days earlier than with other children, and that her birth was 12 days earlier. Several days before Our Lady's birth, Anna had told Joachim that the time was approaching for her to be delivered. She sent messengers to Sepphoris, where her younger sister Maraha lived, to the widow Enu, sister of Elizabeth, in the valley of Zebulun, and to her niece Mary Salome at Bethsaida, asking these 3 women to come to her. I saw them on their journeys. The widow Enu had a serving lad with her. The other 2 women were accompanied by their husbands who, however, went back on approaching Nazareth. I saw that on the day before Anna was delivered, Joachim sent his many manservants out to the herds, and among Anna's new maidservants he kept in the house only those who were needed. He, too, went out into his nearest pasture. I saw that Anna's firstborn daughter, Mary Helly, looked after the house. She was then about 19 years old and was married to Cleophas, one of Joachim's chief shepherds, by whom she had a little daughter, Mary Cleophas, now about 4 years old. After praying, Joachim chose out his finest lambs, kids, and cattle, sending shepherds to take them to the temple as a thank offering. He did not return home until nightfall. I saw the 3 cousins arriving at Anna's house in the evening. They went to her in her room behind the hearth and embraced her. After Anna had told them that the time was near for her to be delivered, they stood up and sang a hymn together, "Praise the Lord God, He has shown mercy to His people and has redeemed Israel, and has fulfilled the promise which He gave to Adam in paradise that the seed of the woman should crush the head of the serpent," and so on. I can no longer recite it all by heart. Anna prayed as though in ecstasy. She introduced into the hymn all the prophetic symbols of Mary. She said, "The seed given by God to Abraham has ripened in me." She spoke of the promise to Sarah of Isaac's birth and said, "The blossoming of Aaron's rod is perfected in me." At that moment I saw her as though suffused with light, I saw the room full of radiance, and Jacob's ladder appearing above it. The women were overcome with astonishment and joy, and I think that they also saw the vision. When the prayer of welcome was over, the travelers were refreshed with a slight meal of bread and fruit, and water mixed with balsam. They ate and drank standing up, and then lay down till midnight to rest from their journey. Anna did not go to bed, but prayed, and at midnight woke the other women to pray with her. They followed her to her praying place behind a curtain. Anna opened the doors of a little cupboard in the wall which contained a casket with holy objects. On each side were lights, perhaps lamps, but I am not sure. They had to be pushed up in their holders, and then little bits of shavings put underneath to prevent them from sinking down. After this the lights were lit. There was a cushioned stool at the foot of this sort of little altar. The casket contained some of Sarah's hair. Anna had a great veneration for her, some of Joseph's bones brought by Moses from Egypt, and something belonging to Tobias, I think a relic of his clothing, also the little shining, white, pear-shaped goblet from which Abraham had drunk when blessed by the angel. This had been given to Joachim from the Ark of the Covenant when he was blessed in the temple. I now know that this blessing took the form of wine and bread, and was a strengthening and sacramental food. Anna knelt before the little cupboard with one of the women on each side and the third behind her. She recited another hymn. I think it mentioned the burning bush of Moses. Then I saw the room filled with supernatural light which became more intense as it wove itself round Anna. The women sank to the ground as though stunned. The light round Anna took the exact form of the burning bush of Moses on Horeb, and I could no longer see her. The whole flame streamed inwards, and then I suddenly saw that Anna received the shining child Mary in her hands, wrapped her in her mantle, pressed her to her heart, and laid her naked on the stool in front of the holy relics, still continuing her prayer. Then I heard the child cry, and saw that Anna brought out wrappings from under the great veil which enveloped her. She wrapped the child first in grey and then in red swaddling bands up to her arms. Her breast, arms, and head were bare. The appearance of the burning bush around Anna had now vanished. The women stood up and received the newborn child in their arms with great astonishment. They shed tears of joy. They all joined in a hymn of praise, and Anna lifted her child up on high as though making an offering. I saw at that moment the room full of light, and beheld several angels singing Gloria and Alleluia. I heard all their words. They announced that on the 20th day the child was to be called Mary. Anna now went into her bedroom and lay down on her couch. The women in the meantime unwrapped the child, bathed it, and wrapped it up again, and then laid it beside its mother. There was a little woven wicker basket which could be fastened beside the bed or against the wall or at the foot of the bed, whichever was wanted, so that the child could always have its place near its mother and yet separate. The women now called Joachim, the father. He came to Anna's couch and knelt down weeping, his tears falling on the child. Then he lifted it up in his arms and uttered his song of praise, like Zacharias at John's birth. He spoke in this hymn of the holy seed, implanted by God in Abraham, which had continued amongst God's people by means of the covenant ratified by circumcision, but had now reached its highest blossoming in this child and was, in the flesh, completed. I also heard how this song of praise declared that now was fulfilled the word of the prophet, "There shall come forth a rod out of the root of Jesse." He said, too, in great humility and devoutness, that he would now gladly die. It was only then that I noticed that Mary Helly, Anna's elder daughter, did not have sight of the child until later. Although she had become the mother of Mary Cleopas several years before, she was not present at Our Lady's birth, perhaps because, according to Jewish rules, it was not considered seemly for a daughter to be with her mother at such a time. Next morning I saw the serving men and maids and many people from nearby gathered round the house. They were allowed to enter in groups, and the child was shown by the women to them all. Many were greatly moved, and some led better lives thereafter. The neighbors had come because they had seen in the night a glowing light above the house, and because the birth of Anna's child after long unfruitfulness was looked upon as a great favor from heaven. In the moment when the newborn child lay in the arms of her Holy Mother Anna, I saw that at the same time the child was presented in heaven in the sight of the most Holy Trinity, and greeted with unspeakable joy by all the heavenly host. Then I understood that there was made known to her in a supernatural manner her whole future with all her joys and sorrows. Mary was taught infinite mysteries, and yet was and remained a child. This knowledge of hers we cannot understand, because our knowledge grows on the tree of good and evil. She knew everything in the same way as a child knows its mother's breast and that it is to drink from it. As the vision faded in which I saw the child Mary being thus taught in heaven through grace, I heard her weep for the first time. I often see pictures like this, but for me they are inexpressible and probably for most people not quite comprehensible. Therefore I do not relate them. In the moment of Mary's birth I saw the tidings brought to the patriarchs in limbo. I saw them all, especially Adam and Eve, filled with inexpressible joy at the fulfillment of the promise given in paradise. I also perceived that the patriarchs advanced in their state of grace, that the place of their sojourn became brighter and more spacious, and that it was given to them to have more influence on earth. It was as if all their labor and penance, all the struggling, crying and yearning of their lives had matured into its destined fruit. At the time of Mary's birth I saw a great and joyful agitation in nature, in the animal world, in the hearts of all good men, and I heard the sound of sweet singing. Sinners, however, were overwhelmed by fear and sorrow. I saw, specially near Nazareth, but also in the rest of the promised land, many who were possessed break out at that time into violent ravings. They were hurled from side to side with loud cries, and the devils shrieked from within them, "We must surrender, we must go out." In Jerusalem I saw how the aged priest Simeon, who lived in the temple, was startled at the moment of Mary's birth by loud shrieks coming from the madmen and those possessed of the devil, of whom many were shut up in a building in one of the streets on the Temple Hill. Simeon lived near them and was partly responsible for looking after them. About midnight I saw him go to the open space before the house of those possessed and inquire of one of them, who lived nearest, as to the cause of the loud cries with which everyone had been roused from their sleep. The man cried still louder that he must go out. Simeon opened the door, the possessed one rushed out, and Satan cried from within him, "I must go out, we must all go out. A virgin has been born. There are so many angels on earth who torment us. We must now go out and may nevermore enter into men." I saw Simeon praying fervently, the wretched man was flung back and forth on the open space, and I saw the devil go out of him. It gave me great pleasure to see the aged Simeon. I also saw the prophetess Anna and Noemi wakened and informed by visions of the birth of a chosen child. Noemi was the sister of Lazarus' mother. She was in the temple and later became Mary's teacher. They met and told each other of what they had seen. I think they knew Anna, Our Lady's mother. In the night of Mary's birth I saw in a city of the Chaldeans that 5 Sibyls, or virgin prophetesses, were granted visions. I saw them hastening to the priests, who then made known in many places that these prophetesses had seen that a virgin had been born and that many gods had come down to earth to greet her, while other spirits fled before her lamenting. I saw, too, that the picture of a virgin holding scales evenly balanced with corn and grapes, which the watchers of the stars had seen since Mary's conception, was no longer visible to them. In the hour of Mary's birth it seemed to move out of the star, in which it left a gap, and to sink down and away from it in one particular direction. They now made and set up in their temple the great idol which I saw there in my visions of the life of our Lord. It had some connection with the Blessed Virgin. Later they set up in their temple another symbolic image of the Blessed Virgin, the closed garden. I saw live animals lying in this temple and being cared for. I am not sure whether they were dogs. They were fed with the flesh of other animals. Within the temple of the three holy kings I had till now always seen a wonderful illumination at night. It was as if one looked up into a starry sky set with all the constellations. They used to make alterations in this artificial sky in their temple according to the visions they saw in the heavens. Thus after the birth of Mary the illumination which had previously come from outside now came from within. When the Blessed Virgin was born, I saw cast into the sea, from its place in the temple on an island in a river, that image of a winged woman with a balance in her hand, bending down over a child in a little ship lying in the top of a tree, the image which I had seen placed there long ago, before the time of Elias, in accordance with the forced utterance of an idol. The little tree on which lay the child in the ship remained in its place. A church was built there later. At the moment of Mary's birth I saw falling from the temple ceiling pieces of that winged female figure with three breasts which I had seen fixed to the ceiling of a temple when a messenger from Elias announced his master's prophecy of a coming virgin. The face, the three breasts, and the lower part of the body all fell down and were broken to pieces. The bushel-shaped crown, the arms with the ears of corn, the upper part of the body and the wings did not fall down. On the 9th of September, the day after Mary's birth, I saw in the house several other relations from the neighborhood. I heard many names but have forgotten them again. I also saw many of Joachim's menservants arriving from the more distant pastures. All were shown the newborn child, and all were filled with great joy. The meal in the house was accompanied by much rejoicing. On the 10th and 11th of September I again saw many visiting the child Mary. Among them were relations of Joachim's from the valley of Zebulun. On these occasions the child was brought into the front part of the house in its little cradle and put on a high stand, like a sawing bench, to be shown to the people. The child was wrapped in red, covered with transparent white stuff, up to its bare arms, and had a transparent little veil round its neck. The cradle was covered with red and white stuff. I saw Mary Cleophas, the 2 or 3-year-old child of Anna's elder daughter and of Cleophas, playing with the child Mary and caressing her. Mary Cleophas was a fat, sturdy child, and wore a sleeveless white dress, with a red hem hung with red buttons like tiny apples. Round her bare arms she wore little white wreaths, which seemed to be made of feathers, silk, or wool. Today I saw great preparations for a feast in Anna's house. All the furniture was moved aside, and in the front part of the house the dividing screens had been taken away to make one large hall instead of a number of small rooms. Along each side of this hall I saw a long, low table set out for a meal with many things that I had not noticed before. Fragile vases with open-work tops like baskets stood on the table, they may have been for flowers. On a side table I saw many little white sticks, apparently made of bone, and spoons shaped like deep shells, with handles ending in a ring. There were also little curved tubes, perhaps for sucking up liquid. In the center of the hall a kind of altar table had been set up, covered in red and white. On it lay a little trough-shaped basket cradle, of red and white wicker work, covered with a sky-blue cloth. Beside this altar stood a lectern draped in a cloth on which lay parchment prayer scrolls. 5 priests from Nazareth stood before the altar, one of them wearing grander vestments than the others. Joachim stood near them. In the background near the altar were several men and women belonging to the families of Anna and Joachim, all in festal attire. I remember seeing Anna's sister Maraha from Sepphoris, and Anna's elder daughter and others. Anna herself, though no longer in bed, remained in her room behind the hearth and did not appear at the ceremony. Enu, Elizabeth's sister, brought out the child Mary, wrapped to the arms in red swaddling clothes covered with transparent white stuff, and laid her in Joachim's arms. The priests approached the altar where the scrolls lay and prayed aloud. 2 of them held up the train of the principal one. Joachim then laid the child in the hands of the high priest, who, lifting her up in offering as he prayed, laid her in the cradle on the altar. He then took a pair of scissors which, like our snuffers, had a little box at the end to hold what was cut off. With this he cut off 3 little tufts of hair from the child's head, one from each side and one from the top, and burnt them in a brazier. Then he took a vase of oil and anointed the child's 5 senses, touching with his thumb her ears, eyes, nose, mouth, and breast. He also wrote the name Mary on a parchment and laid it on the child's breast. She was then returned to Joachim, who gave her to Enu to be taken back to Anna. Hymns were sung and after that the meal began, but I saw no more. There is such jubilation in nature, I hear birds singing, I see lambs and kids frolicking, and where Anna's house once stood the doves are flying about in great flocks as if drunk with joy. Of the house and its surroundings nothing now remains, it is now a wilderness. I saw some pilgrims, holding long staffs and their garments girt about them, with cloths wrapped round their heads like caps. They are going through this part of the country on their way to Mount Carmel. A few hermits from Mount Carmel live here, and the pilgrims asked them in amazement what was the meaning of this joy in nature. They were told that it was ever thus in that country on the eve of Mary's birth, and that it was probably there that Anna's house had stood. A pilgrim who had passed that way before had, they said, told them that this was first noticed a long time ago by a devout man, and that this had led to the celebration of the feast of Our Lady's Nativity. I now saw this institution of the feast myself. 250 years after the death of the Blessed Virgin, I saw a very devout man journeying through the Holy Land in order to seek out and venerate all the places connected with the life of Jesus upon earth. I saw that this holy man was given guidance from above, and often remained for several days in prayer and contemplation at different places, enjoying many visions and full of interior delight. He had for many years felt, in the night of the 7th to the 8th of September, a great joyfulness in nature and heard a lovely singing in the air, and at last, in answer to his earnest prayer, he was told by an angel in a dream that this was the birth night of the Blessed Virgin Mary. He received this revelation on his journey to Mount Sinai or Horeb. It was told him at the same time that in a cave of the prophet Elias on that mountain was a walled-up chapel in honor of the mother of the Messiah, and that he was to inform the hermits living there of both these things. Thereupon I saw him arriving at Mount Sinai. The place where the monastery now stands was already at that time inhabited by isolated hermits, and just as precipitous on the side facing the valley as it is now, when people have to be hoisted up by means of a pulley. I saw now that upon his announcement the feast of the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin was first celebrated here by the hermits on September 8 about the year 250, and that its celebration spread later to the universal church. I saw, too, how he and the hermits looked for the cave of Elias and the chapel in honor of the Blessed Virgin. These were, however, very difficult to find among the many caves of the Essenes and of other hermits. I saw many deserted gardens here and there near these caves, with magnificent fruit trees in them. After praying, the devout man was inspired to take a Jew with them when they visited these caves, and was told that they might recognize as the cave of Elias the one that he was unable to enter. I saw thereupon how they sent an aged Jew into the caves, and how he felt himself thrust out of the narrow entrance of one of them, however much he tried to force his way in. In this way they recognized it as the cave of Elias. They found in it a second cave, walled up, which they opened, and this was the place where Elias had prayed in veneration of the future mother of the Savior. The big, beautifully patterned stones which made the wall were used later for building the church. They also found in the cave many holy bones of patriarchs and prophets, as well as many woven screens and objects of earlier worship. All these were preserved in the church. I saw much of Mount Horeb on this occasion, but have forgotten it again. I still remember that the place where Moses saw the burning bush is called in the language of the place the shadow of God, and that one may walk on it only with bare feet. I also saw a mountain there entirely of red sand, on which, however, very fine fruit trees grew. I saw much of Saint Bridget, and was given much knowledge of what had been revealed to this saint about Mary's conception and birth. I remember that the Blessed Virgin said to her that if women with child celebrated the vigil of her nativity by fasting and by the pious recitation of 9 Ave Marias in honor of her 9 months sojourn in her mother's womb, and if they renewed this devotion frequently during their pregnancy and the day before they expected their confinement, at the same time receiving with devotion the Holy Sacrament, she would bring their prayer before God and beg for a happy delivery even in difficult and dangerous conditions. I myself had today a vision of Our Lady who came to me and told me, among other things, that whoever recited with love and devotion on the afternoon of this day 9 Ave Marias in honor of her 9 months sojourn in her mother's womb and of her birth, continuing this devotion for 9 days, would give the angels 9 flowers each day for a bouquet which they would receive in heaven and present to the Blessed Trinity, to obtain favor for the suppliant. Later I felt myself transported to a height between heaven and earth. The earth lay below, dark and troubled. Above in heaven I saw the Blessed Virgin before the throne of God, between the choirs of angels and the ordered hosts of the saints. I saw, built for her out of devotions and prayers on earth, 2 portals or thrones of honor which grew at last into palaces like churches, and even into whole cities. It was strange to see how these buildings were made entirely of herbs, flowers, and garlands all intertwined, their different species expressing the different kinds and different merits of the prayers of individual human beings and of whole communities. I saw all being taken by angels or saints from the hands of the suppliants and being carried up to heaven.